Yesterday we looked at equivalent fractions, and in all of those examples the answer ended up being bigger or larger than the initial fraction. Today we're going to be looking at equivalent fractions where the answers become smaller, and then we're going to be moving on to something called simplifying fractions as well. They use the same idea as we were using yesterday, except this time, because they're getting smaller, we're actually going to be looking to divide by something rather than multiplying. So exactly the same idea. Whatever we do to the top, we do to the bottom, etc., etc., and vice versa. So when we look at this first example, I compare 14 with 7, and I say to myself, what do I do to 14 to give me an answer of 7? I have to divide it by a number. I have to divide it by 2. So that means we divide the top number by exactly the same amount. We divide it by 2. 6 divided by 2 gives me 3. So my new answer is 3/7. When we look at number 2, we do exactly the same thing. We compare the 40 and the 8, and we know that we're dealing with division. So what have we divided 40 by to give me 8? The answer is 5, which means that I therefore must divide the 15 by 5 as well. So 15 divided by 5 gives me 3. Okay, so you'll have a few questions like those to practice, and then the rest of them will be like these. These are what is known as simplifying fractions. Okay, when you add, subtract, multiply and divide fractions, you might well have to simplify, or sometimes known as writing in the lowest terms at the very end. And it's a similar idea to numbers 1 and 2. What we're looking for is we're looking for the same number that will divide exactly into 9 and exactly into 12. Well, I know that both of these appear in my 3 times table. So that means I know that 3 will divide into both of them. So what I do is I cross out the 9, that shows that I've divided by something, and I write down how many times 3 goes into 9. So that gives me 3. Then I do exactly the same to the 12. Because I've divided this by 3, I need to divide this by 3. And what I do here is I write down how many times 3 has divided into 12, which gives me 4. I now compare these two numbers. This is odd, this is even, nothing else is going to divide in, so my answer is 3/4. Okay. Now, when we look at number 4, the numbers are slightly larger. Sometimes we can do it in stages, sometimes we can do it in one big step. Let's just do it in stages to begin with so that you can see. Some of you are probably sitting there and thinking, oh yeah, well I can see that 6 goes into both of them, which is fine. But let's imagine you couldn't, and you use this method instead. You said, oh well actually I can spot that they're both even numbers, which means that 2 is going to go in. So I cross out 24 and I write down the answer to how many times 2 goes into 24, which gives me 12. Then I do exactly the same to the bottom number. I divided this by 2, so it means I need to divide this by 2, and that goes in 15 times. So I'm just going to rewrite those two there. So it gives me 12/15. Ah, wait a minute. 12 and 15, I know both of them are in my 3 times table. So 3 goes into 12 4 times, and 3 goes into 15 5 times. So that gives me an answer of 4/5. So that shows it doesn't matter how many stages you take, you can still end up with the same answer. It's just sometimes quicker if you can spot the biggest number first of all. So if you go back, it was originally 24/30. 6 goes into 24 4 times, 6 goes into 30 5 times. But it doesn't matter that I've taken extra stages here, I still end up with exactly the same answer. Alright, number 5, 6/15. I know that both of these are in my 3 times table, so I cross out the 6 and I write down the answer to how many times 3 goes into 6, which is twice. I then do exactly the same here. I divided this by 3, so I need to divide this by 3. 3 into 15 goes 5 times. That's 2/5. And when I check, this is an even number, this is an odd number, nothing else is going to go in. Okay, on this one, 16/40. Okay, I'm going to jump in with the biggest number that I can think of straight away and then see where it goes from there. So I know that both of these are in my 8 times table. So 8 into 16 goes twice. 8 into 40 goes 5 times. I end up with 2/5, and I know that I can't go any lower. Now, if I hadn't spotted that 8 goes into both of those, I could divide it by 2 and then divide it by 4. But the aim is to always try and get your answer in its lowest terms. So when you think you've got the answer, just double check carefully to make sure that it can't be simplified. Because if you're asked in an exam to write it in its lowest terms and you don't, you'll get it marked wrong. Okay, so this is how you simplify fractions. And again, if you need to ask any questions, then feel free to join me on the Zoom session. If you don't need to ask questions, then obviously there's no need for you to join the Zoom session. You can go on with the work that I have set you. Okay, good luck.